And we're on our pre-show for today's N10-009 Network Plus Study Group. Hello, everyone. Make yourself comfortable. Grab a chair. Settle in. We are in our 10-minute warning here before we start. We will begin the stream at the top of the hour. I guess technically we've started the stream, but the actual content, the actual fun part, it's only so fun up to this point, I guess. Now we have even more fun at the top of the hour. In the meantime, you can put your virtual pin in our pin cushion, our virtual pin cushion, our virtual map of the world, and we can find out where you are connecting from. You can do that using the link that is on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. That is also the link that we will use for all of the Q&A that we do today. You can not only answer questions from that link, but you can also submit questions from that link. We will address your questions, look through them in the second hour of the live stream. Hello, chat room. Hope everybody is doing well. Glad to have you here. Always like the Network Plus study groups. We're past sort of the beginning of the month. We're right in the middle. And now it's time to see how much we know about networking. I've got all new questions for you today, as I do every study group. We will do our rewind question, I guess, at the beginning. There is one repeat. That's it. And then the rest of them are brand new. So if you've been on one of our live streams before, or this is your first live stream, you can come back to the next one, and it'll be all different questions. That would be kind of boring if I did the same questions every month. Maybe I should try that. It would save me a lot of time. I will say that. It takes about half a day to prep for one of these. So it would be nice to simply sit down and turn the camera on. Doesn't always work that easily. The life of a person who creates content on the internet is it's a difficult, many and varied existence. And so here we are. Hope everybody's doing well. We got people checking in from Chicago and Texas and New York and Nigeria. We've got folks in Atlanta. We got lots going on. We got folks everywhere checking in. Thanks for being here. Always like the live streams for Network Plus. I feel like I really got my feet underneath me in the world of technology once I understood the network. And I think once you understand the network, everything else sort of makes sense. The applications make more sense. The servers make more sense. The transfer of data across the network certainly makes more sense. You can start to understand more about what's happening under the surface, under the hood of the network. Once you learn the language, you can start talking to everybody. All right, we've got, let's do our checks. I'm looking at cameras. Cameras look good. I'm looking at stream, 5.95 megabits per second. So 6 megabits per second or so is what I'm sending to YouTube. You're seeing the stream seconds after I send it. So I'm not sending the single stream to all of you. I'm sending a single stream to YouTube, and YouTube is grabbing that stream, re-rendering it, rendering it again into their own format that is specific to what you're looking for. So that's why when you click the cog wheel and you choose 2K, or I guess in this case, I'm doing 1080p. That's the top that we're doing on a live stream. I'll explain why in a moment. You also have options there for other resolutions. And you can go all the way down, I guess, to 320 or 180p. You can go way down. So when I send them this stream, they create multiple streams from it and make those available to you. That takes time. And so that's why there's about a 10-second difference in time between when I talk into this microphone and when you hear the information that I'm putting into this microphone. So 10 seconds, which actually is quite good. That's very, very, very fast on a live stream. If I changed this live stream to 4K, last time we did a test of it, it was around 30 seconds, which in the big picture of things, 30 seconds, not really that bad, but a lot of what we do in this first hour is very interactive. So I'm asking a question of you. Imagine if I had to wait 30 seconds to get an answer from you. I'd have to talk a lot, and there would be a lot of us just waiting for you to register your answers. So it would extend the time here. When it's only 10 seconds, it's almost real time for us because I could see the messages come up in the chat. You can see the chat is right here. It's where it always is during the live stream. And then we've got, of course, right in front of us is the live stream content. This is what's going out of our Blackmagic streaming device, our 4K streamer, which we are not streaming at 4K, our 4K streamer that we are using a quarter of its capabilities and sending 1080p. Because 1080p is a fourth. It's 25% the amount of video as 4K. So we've got that. We've got our video switcher, which is this crazy thing. It's sort of at the second big monitor that's here. So that tells me what's on standby, what you're seeing, and then I have a list of all the cameras we're using. We don't have many cameras on the bottom. We have 8 inputs we could be using. Maybe we'll add to that. I have some ideas of things. We've got what you are now seeing, which is my main screen. These 2 monitors here are kind of my daily drivers. This is what I'm normally using as a 2-screen setup in the studio. And then I can see what time it is. We've got here also, this is where the slides are actually shown. The more static information is over on this screen. And when I'm moving things around the screen, although I'm looking at the camera, I'm usually directing what I am seeing by clicking on that mouse. So there's a couple mice here that we're working with. We got a lot going on. What's a good way to ask questions? You go to the link that is on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA. At the top of the screen will be a tab. You can switch between answering live questions and asking and submitting questions. So you can switch between those right at the top. That'll give you the view of that. So I will go through those questions in the second hour. And that's the best place because I see all of the questions that come up there. If you put questions into the chat, I might see them, but they go by so quick that I very easily will miss questions in the chat room. And I don't want to miss anything that's important. So that's what we do. Is this recorded? Well, this is recorded. What we are doing now is not a recording. August, technically, by the time you see it 10 seconds after I say it, it sort of is. It's real time. We're doing real time right now. If you're watching this on a replay, there's not a live icon at the top, but they are being recorded. At the end of the live stream, when I hit the stop button, it automatically renders it quickly on the YouTube side and puts it into the playlist automatically. So there's not much we have to do there. All I have to do is hit the stop button, and I don't have to think about it. I do extra editing for the podcast. There's an audio-only version of this that I send out in podcast form. That podcast form, I do have to edit. That doesn't take very long. Gives me a chance. I sort of compress some of the audio just a little bit, just a tad, just a sliver. I don't really think it needs it, but I do it anyway just to stay consistent. And then once I have that compressed, I will change the audio to make it a bit more industry standard. So the audio levels all the way through, and then I post it. I separate out the first hour and the second hour when we post that at professormesser.com/podcast. That's what that is. All right. It's kind of nice to be doing Network Plus right now, isn't it? Because for those of you keeping track, the September 25th, is that next week, is the last day for the older 220-1100 series A+. So we don't have to worry about that right now. It's nice not to have a worry about a deadline. So we'll talk about deadlines. We'll talk about expirations or the retirement dates for the current Network Plus exam, but it's so far in the future, not a concern. So all of you are in good shape. We got a minute to go, 1 minute. I should probably do a quick check. We are recording. You can see things happening there. We've got things looking good here. Stream data looks wonderbar. We've got everything looking good on this side. Numbers look great. The ones I'm really concerned about is the cache number. That's the one number I care about. It should be at 3 or 4%. If it starts getting up to 5% or more, something has gone horribly, horribly wrong. And that's what gives me a little bit of information about it. So we will get started in just a moment with our Network Plus live stream. We'll get this done, our study group. So we will make sure that happens. The release dates, the A+ retire. The 1100 series exams retire on the 25th of September. The 1200 series exams, however, have been out since March. So there's been the 6-month overlap that we're coming to the end to, and finally there will be no overlap. Look at that, 12 o'clock straight up. That means we can start our keynote. We can look for a green light. Green lights are good. We hit the play button on the green light. It does something, which is also what I want. And let's do a live stream, everybody. Today is Network Plus, so let's do a Network Plus live stream, shall we? Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the September 2025 Network Plus study group. This is the N10-009 version of Network Plus, where I will ask you questions today that come directly from those specific exam objectives. And if you are here live and online for our live stream, you can participate and answer questions along with everyone else on the internet to see just how much you really know about Network Plus. I have a feeling you know quite a bit. We will see if that's true as we go through this. If you are here live, you can participate along with us by joining us on this link. You can go to professormesser.com/QA. That's the link that you see on your screen right there. There it is. And you can see I've got the same link at the bottom. That will take you automatically to a service that's called Vevox, service that allows us to do Q&A in real time here on the World Wide Web. We'd love if you were to join us there. In fact, I have a question waiting for you. If you go to that link, professormesser.com/QA, you will see a link there that asks the question, which of the following would be most likely found in an MDF? As a reminder, before we get to the answers, as a reminder, please, no answers in the chat room. Please don't put any hints into the chat room. Instead, you want to use the link that is on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to answer any of the questions that we do today. The question again is, which of the following would be most likely found in an MDF? Is it a workgroup switch, a wireless mouse and keyboard, a multifunction device, a database server, or a USB charging cable? If you think you know what that answer is, go to the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, to answer this particular question. We will come back to this question in just a moment. In the meantime, let me welcome you. Thank you so much for being here on our study group. We do one of these study groups for Network Plus every month. This is our study group for September. And of course, we have an archive of all of our study groups that you can go back on our YouTube playlist and watch every single one of them. If you are studying for the N10-009, I would highly encourage that because every study group has a different set of questions. So you might learn a little bit, something a little bit different every time. We have one of these study groups, but when we are not here doing a live stream, you can certainly find our entire Network Plus course, which is available for you to watch for free on the YouTube. You can go to professormesser.com/YouTube. We also have a weekly Network Plus pop quiz question. We did ours this week, was yesterday. So you can find those on professormesser.com/Twitter or professormesser.com/X. If I finally decide to call it that, I will eventually. It'll come around. I'll figure it out. We also have those same questions on Instagram. You can find that at professormesser.com/Instagram. You just simply type in professormesser.com/ the name of the social media site you would like to find us on, and we will most likely be there. If we are not, let me know. Maybe I should be over on whatever social media site that is that I am not. We will find out that's really the case. Probably not going to be TikTok, just so you're aware. Earlier, we were talking before we started the live stream about the time frames associated with the current version of Network Plus, and here they are. The N10-009 is a version number. That's the number associated with the current set of exams. Those exams were released on June the 20th of 2024, so they've been around for a little bit over a year at this point, which means the estimated retirement date for those exams, this current set of exams, is the fourth calendar quarter of 2027. So as we sit here approaching what is coming up on the fourth calendar quarter of 2025, we still have 2 years left before we are even getting to that point. So if you are studying as we sit here today in September of 2025 for your Network Plus certification, you are studying the right one, and you don't have to worry about that version changing anytime soon, which is great. The exam itself is a single exam. The exam gives you 90 minutes to go through a maximum of 90 questions. You might get fewer than 90 questions. It's probably likely that you will get just a few less than 90, but you could get a maximum of 90 questions. It could happen, I guess. If that happens, I'd love to hear about it because I still haven't heard anyone getting 90. I think that's their upper limit, and they really do come off of that. The score that you're looking for is on a scale from 100 to 900, and the score you want to get is a 720. How do you calculate that? Nobody knows. We have no idea. The goal is answer as many questions right as you can. Hopefully, it will come out to be a score of 720 or greater, at which point you will be Network Plus certified. The exam itself consists of different kinds of questions. Most of the questions you get will be multiple choice, but there will be performance-based questions on the exam, and we will talk in a moment about what performance-based questions are. And I have a performance-based question for you today. As we do with every study group, there's a brand new performance-based question, freshly written. We'll see how you do with that one. Also want to let you know that, of course, our entire course is available for you to watch for free. Every minute of every video is on YouTube. You don't have to register. There's nothing hidden behind a paywall. It's just out there for you to watch. Otherwise, how would you learn everything there was to learn for the Network Plus? So everything is, of course, out there and available. We do have downloadable versions of our videos. We have course notes. We have a lot more to look at on our website that might help you with your studies. You can find out more about that at professormesser.com/netsuccess. Got more there. As I mentioned, I create a podcast version of this that's an audio-only podcast. So if you want to get this audio automatically downloaded to your favorite mobile device so that it is always there, you can subscribe to our RSS feed at professormesser.com/podcast. professormesser.com/podcast. And you'll find our A+, our Network Plus, and our Security Plus podcast content there. About a day after we are done with this live stream, you will notice that the YouTube video description will have a lot of timestamps that are added to it, almost like magic. Oh, but it's not magic. It's the hard work of my marketing manager, Lori. Hi, Lori. She's watching this replay. And she's putting in all of these timestamps so that you can find exactly what you are looking for on those replays and find it very, very quickly. And of course, you can go back to all of our archives online on the YouTube playlist, and you'll find all of those timestamps are there, and they're able to help you study what you need to know for your Network Plus exam. Thank you, Lori. And if you're someone who's used that or appreciates that, make sure you give Lori a hello and thank you in the chat room. She's probably watching this chat go by as she's watching this live stream, probably at 2x speed, I would hope. Of course, when we are not here doing a live stream, we have a chat that you can join. It is our 24/7 chat over on our Discord server. And as you probably expect, the URL to get to that Discord server is professormesser.com/discord. That's the best place to go. That's where I'll be hanging out after this. That's where a lot of people, we have thousands and thousands and thousands of students that are there studying for their A+, their Network Plus, their Security Plus, and other certifications. And we have other smart people who are already certified that like to hang out and help others as well, which I think just speaks to the value of this very, very powerful community. You can learn more about that at professormesser.com/discord. Great place to go. We also have, of course, the opportunity for you to take your exam. Taking your exam is a kind of an important part of this. If you want to get certified, you have to take the exam. But to take the exam, you have to pay for it. Oh, there's always a downside, isn't there? Well, fortunately, we have an upside that you can consider. Certainly, if you are going through the process of learning about all of this content and you want to take this exam, it would be nice to save a few bucks. So if you are in the US or Canada or a US territory, you can get these CompTIA vouchers at a discount. These are the same vouchers you would find on the CompTIA website that you could go there right now and pay full price for. But why would you pay full price when exactly the same voucher is right here at professormesser.com/vouchers? And you also have the choice when you purchase at professormesser.com to get a voucher that's a one-time voucher, or you can get the new voucher with a retake option. So if something goes horribly wrong during your first time through, you got another try. You don't have to pay extra money to take the exam again. All of that is available at professormesser.com/vouchers. But wait, there's more. As they say, if you purchase from professormesser.com, I want to give you a little bit more, a little bit extra. And if you purchase from my site, I give you something you cannot get anywhere else. and that is my practice exams with the learning for the exam, practicing the things you need to know, and I give you strategies for things you can do during the exam to get better score in my Exam Hacks ebook. The Exam Hacks ebook is a great summary of all of the tips and tricks that I've accumulated through the years, something that might help you. It's a quick read and you can get through it and have these strategies in your mind when you walk into the exam room. All of this is available on my website, professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's now go to the question we asked earlier, which was this one: which of the following would be most likely found in an MDF? Is it a workgroup switch, a wireless mouse and keyboard, a multifunction device, a database server, or a USB charging cable? Let us stop the poll and see what happened. Very different numbers than what we had on our previous study group a month ago. Either I think we're learning something or maybe we're guessing better. Either way works for me. It's a correct answer anyway. 53% of you say database server. 33% of you say a workgroup switch. 11% say a multifunction device. We have 1% that say wireless mouse and keyboard, and 1% that said a USB charging cable. Well, in this case, we go with the majority, the 53% of you that said a database server. That is the answer that we were looking for. A database server is what you would find in a main distribution frame. That is what an MDF is. This is often not referred to as the MDF. It's kind of a sort of an old school way of referring to the computer room, the data center, the main computing facility where all of the core of the network is usually in this MDF. Usually it's a relatively large room. It's probably at the center of your campus or your building. All of the other connectivity from around the campus or around other floors of the building are probably connecting back to this MDF from their IDF, which is the intermediate distribution frame. This is also where you might terminate all of your WAN links. When somebody says we're having something odd going on with the server, those servers are either, they're not in the cloud, they're probably in the MDF. That's probably where most things are. You might even have at your company, you maybe have just this glass in front of the room. You can see into the MDF. People like to be able to see what they are spending all that money on. And here it is, just rows and rows and rows. In this case, it looks like tons of storage, lots of hard drives that are in this particular MDF. Here's another MDF, not quite as pretty, but still certainly as functional. You can see all of the servers back here, lots of wiring on the backside of these 1U servers that are in this particular rack. A lot of whoever did the cabling in here, you did a great job, except for this guy. Who put that in? There's always someone, isn't there? Messes up the whole MDF. There it is. That's your main distribution frame. That is the answer that we were looking for. The database server is what you would find in there. Because this is the main part of the data center, you're not going to find a workgroup switch in there. Workgroup switches are usually in that intermediate distribution frame, in that closet that's on a different floor, for example. Usually in the MDF, you have these big core switches that are hundreds of interfaces on them. So that's certainly not one that you would have a workgroup switch in, certainly not a common to have in your MDF. We also would probably not have a multifunction device. As you already saw, it's kind of hard to get into these rooms. They're all locked up. We're not going to put a printer in there. You won't be able to get your printout because it's in there on the multifunction device. Nope, we probably wouldn't put that there either. We also would not have a USB charging cable, same problem. And we would not have a wireless mouse and keyboard. Probably not a lot of wireless devices in an MDF. We rarely go into the MDF these days. Try to keep it a dark room, as we call it, so that we're not walking in and out of the MDF. Every time someone walks into a room like that, there's the potential for something going badly. So we try to keep people out of that room to avoid it. That is your main distribution frame, and this answer of database server that 53% of you chose is absolutely correct. Well done with that one. Now that we have been able to connect to our professormesser.com/QA, we've been able to answer the question to see how you did. Now let's give you a brand new question. And as I mentioned earlier, we do a performance-based question every month. Our first new question of every study group is a performance-based question. And since this is networking, I've got a good networking performance-based question to go through today. At least I think it is. Let's find out if it is. This one is one that has 5 different questions associated with it, but it is associated, all 5 of those questions are associated with the information that is in this firewall rule set that you see on the screen. This firewall rule set has a number of different rules associated with it. And what I would like you to do, as it says at the top, evaluate the following traffic flows to this server and determine if these firewall rules would block or allow the traffic. So this rule set is effectively on a single server, probably a software firewall that is running on that server, and it is able to allow or disallow traffic based on these 7 different rules that have been explicitly defined in a firewall rule base. Now, I'm not going to spell out what all of these different rules are because it would just take too much time. But if you are here live, you're not listening in on the podcast side. If you're on the podcast side, you might want to fast forward a bit until you can get back to a screen to see what all of these different rules are. So I have these 5 different traffic flows that I've described. I want you to tell me, is that traffic flow going to be blocked or is that traffic flow going to be allowed? The first traffic flow is an inbound SMTPS email transfer from 65.11.124.22. Is that allowed or is it blocked? I want to know. Give me the disposition of that particular traffic flow. The next one is an inbound SSH terminal session from an internal laptop. Would that be allowed or would it be blocked by this firewall? The third is an hourly outbound time synchronization. That would be good to know. We'll have to see if that's allowed or blocked. You can tell me by visiting the URL, professormesser.com/QA. We have an inbound LDAP authentication request from 165.245.77.44. And then the last traffic flow is inbound and outbound VoIP phone calls. There's a little redundancy there. It's the Department of Redundancy department. But I think you get the idea of the 5 different traffic flows I would like you to tell me about. So this gives us a way to start evaluating the flow of traffic through the network and evaluating how these rules work inside of a traditional firewall. Pretty much any firewall you would run into. Very unusual to find firewalls that work differently than this, but there are a few out there, and we can talk about that in a bit. If you think you know the answer, you go to professormesser.com/QA. I will step you through every single one of these so that you can get a feel for what these might be. Make sure you have a look at all of those different options that are there. It would be interesting to see what you think the answers are. I know what the answers are, or I think I know what the answers are because I went through it earlier. I'd like you to tell me what the answers might be. Think you know the answer? Feel free to give it a try. Got a lot to pour through there to see if you know what all 5 of those. A lot of you are putting your answers in now. You can submit those at any time by going to professormesser.com/QA. I'm going to step through each one of these. I'll give you an overview of how you go through this process, and then we'll step through each one of these rules to determine what this might be. So it might be good to see what this happens to be. This is an involved performance-based question. I don't really do performance-based questions in my live streams that have this many different components to it. There's 7 different rules. There's 5 different traffic flows. But this is not an unusual ask for people that are taking the exam. You might get a question on your exam that has this level of complexity. Fortunately, these performance-based questions are limited. There's usually only a handful of these at the beginning of the exam. So you do have the option at the beginning of the exam to skip over these. What I would recommend is probably reading through it and then skipping over it and doing the multiple choice questions and then leaving yourself enough time that you could come back to this and step through each one of these. So hopefully this gives you an idea of what you can work with. Now, a number of you have submitted your answers already, so let me step through how we would approach this question and how we can evaluate each one of these rules to see if it would be allowed or blocked on this firewall. So on the screen, the big part on the screen that we're going to work with is this firewall rule base. You can see it's numbered rules 1 through 7. And generally speaking, at the end of a firewall rule base like this one, you can just assume that if there is not an explicit rule that allows it, then there is an implicit deny at the bottom of the rule base. That's the one thing I didn't put in here, but you can just assume that's the case, that if it's not in this list, you don't get to come into our network. I will tell you that for 99% of the firewalls that you will run into, that is the default answers, that if it's not a specific rule that you have placed into the rule base, we call those explicit rules. If you have not added an explicit rule and it doesn't match any of those rules, then it will automatically be blocked, which is a very, very secure way to have a firewall operate. And I would think that most firewalls are smart enough to do it that way. I have seen some recently that are not. So make sure you check the firewall that you are using to see if it has an implicit deny at the bottom or if it doesn't have an implicit deny. Do you imagine a firewall rule base that just, if it's not in the rule base, you just allow it? That doesn't, it's not much of a firewall, is it? I think we refer to those as patch cables. I think that's what that is. So let's step through each one of these one by one. Notice these 7 rules have a different types of tuples associated with them. There is a rule number. There's a remote IP and remote port. That is where the traffic is coming from. That's where it is inbound from. And then we have a local port, which is a port that is on our local device. And we have a protocol associated with that, in this case, TCP or UDP. And then the disposition, the action column, which is what we will do with that traffic. Is that traffic allowed or is that traffic denied? And you can see here, most of the traffic here is allowed. We only have one deny at the bottom. And of course, you can imagine that implicit deny is really a rule number 8, which is an all-any rule. Anything that is not listed above this is also denied. So that is an implicit deny at the bottom. So let's step through each one of these one by one to see how this would work. So let's look at our first rule, which is an inbound SMTPS email transfer from 65.11.124.22. So this is a multi-step question, by the way, because if it's SMTPS, we need to know the port number associated with SMTPS. At least on this firewall we do, because this is a traditional port-based firewall. Or I guess it could be a next-generation firewall that we are simply using in a port-based manner. Either one of those, I think you could imagine being in use. For those of you that don't remember offhand what the port number is for SMTP, this is the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol Secure. The default port number for that is TCP 587. So now we do what the firewall does. We start stepping through the rule base. So we go to the top and say 10.0.0.0/8. If anything is inbound, which means it's coming from a remote IP address with that number to local port 22 and it's TCP, we're going to allow that. Well, does SMTP Secure use port 22? It does not. It uses TCP 587, so that rule does not apply to that particular traffic flow. So then the firewall goes to the next rule in the firewall, which is anything that's on 10.0.0.0/8 to 3389 is allowed. Does that match this traffic coming through? It does not. Let's keep going through our list. The next one is rule number 3. If it's any IP address out in the world with any particular port number coming inbound to port 587 using TCP, we're going to allow that. Wait, 587? Look, that's exactly the port number we have in this case, which means if we were to look at our firewall log, we would see that that traffic flow would match on rule number 3, and it would be allowed, which means number 1 on our list, the inbound SMTPS traffic that is coming from 65.11.124.122, which is any IP address, will be allowed on our network. Number 1 is allowed. Let's go to the next one on our list. That next rule, we're going to go through the same process, probably not as tedious. We'll skip over the things that we did before, but you would follow the same process. You start at the top of the rule base and you wait until you fire on the first rule that matches. And once you fire on that first rule, you're done with evaluating rules in the firewall. Even if there was a rule later on down the firewall that blocked port 587, let's say we had a rule 7 that blocked 587, too bad. You allowed 587 earlier up, so therefore it will never be blocked. Just so you're aware of how the firewall thinks about these different rules. It doesn't have to compare and contrast rules. It just starts at the top and goes all the way to the bottom. And as soon as it finds a match, it finishes its check. It doesn't go any further down that list. Number 2 on our list is an inbound SSH terminal session from an internal laptop, which uses Secure Shell. That's what SSH is. And if you recall, Secure Shell uses TCP/22. In fact, we don't have to go very far. The very first rule in our firewall is 10.0.0.0/8, which means it is an internal IP address. This goes back to our Network Plus studies where we had to know what a public IP address is. We also have to know what a private IP address is. And a private IP address is going to have the information that you see here. We have 10.0.0.0/8 is certainly in that private IP address range. So that would be a local or internal IP address. And it says if anything's coming across on port 22 using TCP, which is SSH, it's going to be allowed. So number 2 will be traffic that is allowed. And of course, since we fired on rule 1, the firewall is not even going to evaluate rules 2 through 7 because we already have a match on rule number 1. All of those tuples, all of those different parameters in that rule have to match for that to fire. If it was coming from a different IP address, it would not have fired on rule number 1. If it was a different port number, it would not have fired on rule number 1, just so you're aware of how those firewalls operate. Let's go to number 3 on our list, an hourly outbound time synchronization. For those of you familiar with the time synchronization process, it uses a protocol known as the Network Time Protocol, or NTP, and the protocol used for NTP is UDP 123. Now, this is an outbound communication. So we not only need to look at things like the remote IP address that we're sending to, in this case, we should also look at the port number that we are sending to remotely. And as we can see, UDP 123 for NTP matches rule number 6, which is port 123 using UDP. And you can see the disposition for that traffic is to be allowed. So we have more traffic that we are allowing through our network. So the answer for number 3 is we would allow that. And then we have number 4, an inbound LDAP authentication request from IP address 165.245.77.44. What that tells us already is that this traffic is not coming from somewhere internally because it is not a private IP address. That's a public IP address, which means it will be coming from any remote IP. It would not match, for example, rule number 1 or rule number 2 because the remote IP addresses certainly don't match that. Now, we know that LDAP is the Lightweight Directory Access Protocol, and you can see that LDAP by itself uses TCP 389. We don't have any TCP 389 in our list, but there is also a Lightweight Directory Access Protocol Secure. The secure flavor of LDAP runs on TCP port 636. Well, maybe that's in our list. Oh, that's not in our list either, which means that there is no single rule in this firewall that would allow either LDAP or LDAP-S, even though this said just LDAP. I thought I would put both of these in here so that we can really see both of those port numbers. But since there is not a match anywhere in this rule base, it goes to the invisible implicit deny on rule number 8, which means that traffic for rule 4 would be denied. You are not allowed into the network. We are not doing inbound LDAP to this device. And then lastly, same process. We're just going to keep going through this. Inbound and outbound VoIP phone calls. Voice over IP has a number of different protocols that it uses. It is a relatively complex series of protocols that you would run into. It almost seems like constant in the number of protocols that we keep creating for voice over IP. But to be able to first create the call, to put a phone number in and have that go out to the network, we use a protocol known as SIP, S-I-P. That is the Session Initiation Protocol. There are other protocols you could use for that management function. H.323 is another good example of this. But in this particular case, I chose SIP because SIP is one of those protocols listed in your official exam objectives. And SIP by itself uses port 5060 to communicate. We don't even really have to know if that's TCP or UDP, although technically SIP could use either TCP or UDP. I see it commonly UDP when it's on the inside of your network. I've seen it use TCP when communicating outside the network, but it doesn't have to. Just so you know that this particular protocol SIP has some flexibility to it. Many protocols are that way. And then you can see if we look for port 5060, it's not on our list. It's not in rule number 1. It's not rule number 2. It's not rule number 3. It's not rule number 4. And although we have other ports that are inbound that we could have on rules 5 and 6, those require you to go outbound on port number 53 or port number 123, which certainly does not match 5060. That means that our rule number 8, which is not there, which is the implicit deny, goes into effect. So anybody trying to perform voice over IP, either inbound or outbound from this device, will have that traffic blocked by the firewall. So that is how you would interpret a firewall rule base, how you would step through each one of those rules until you find something that matches. And if nothing matches, it goes to whatever the default is for that firewall. And in this case, an implicit deny is how this firewall, and 99% of the firewalls out there, will react if there's nothing specific that is in the firewall. I do see times, just so you're aware, I've seen times where people have added another explicit rule at the bottom of their rule base. Maybe they'll have rule number 8, and they'll say from all IP addresses to any port number, on a local port of any, on a protocol of any, we're going to block, we're going to deny. And you'll see at the very bottom that they don't trust the firewall, and it's alleged implicit deny. They want to specifically put an explicit deny at the bottom of the firewall, and your firewall might require you to do that if you would like to have a deny at the bottom. One of the things that I find is really useful on these lists of trying to figure out what it happens to be is the part that having that at the very bottom is that many firewalls will only log information if it is a rule. So I have had some of the folks that I've set up firewalls before, they will put that into the firewall, that explicit deny, just so that they log every single deny that comes through the firewall. Does that increase the amount of log space you will use? Oh, yes. It creates an enormous log. Imagine logging not just the things that are allowed through the firewall. Imagine if you log every single session that is blocked by the firewall. And although that does create a massive set of logs, some folks that have these firewalls installed would like to see that massive log. They want to capture all of that information, so they're all ready for the large log files. They're fine with that. Much more important to them is having that information that they can go through later. So we at least have a feel for what that is. That is the process for going through a firewall log. You could get a question like this on the exam. As some of the folks in the chat room have already mentioned, this was really a question that wasn't just about firewalls. A lot of this question was really about port numbers. So although you spend a lot of time memorizing port numbers, SSH is 22, HTTP is 80, HTTPS is 443, voice over IP SIP uses 5060. You go through this process of memorizing them, but how do you apply them? So here is a really good example of how you take that knowledge that you've spent the time learning and you can apply that knowledge to something practical. Hopefully that's given you a perspective of that. That's our performance-based question of the month. Hopefully you did pretty good on that one. Let's shift gears back to our multiple choice question, shall we? Here's a multiple choice question for you that asks, a switch administrator has configured link aggregation between two switches, but only one side is configured to use LACP. Which of the following would be the most likely result of this configuration? Would it be that lag will work in manual mode? Trunking mode will need to be turned on. The interface status will be set to suspended. Throughput will be less optimal than normal, or the switches will need to be restarted. That question again asks, a switch administrator has configured link aggregation between two switches, but only one side is configured to use LACP. Which of the following would be the most likely result of this configuration? Is it that the lag will work in manual mode? Trunking mode will need to be turned on. The interface status will be set to suspended. Throughput will be less optimal than normal, or the switches will need to be restarted. If you think you know the answer, go to the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, and lock in your answer. As always, please, no answers in the chat room. Please, no hints in the chat room. Instead, you can find that link to submit your answer at professormesser.com/QA. A number of you trying to figure out what in the world this question even means. At this point, I can tell, because I always look at how fast the answers are coming in. The answers come in really, really quickly. We either all know what the answer is, or none of us know what the answer is. We think we know what the answer is. So it's usually all or nothing kind of scenario. When it kind of goes slowly like this, that means there's some thought. And by thought, I mean people are Googling it. Stop Googling the answer. Stop going to your LLM, which is going to give you the wrong answer anyway, by the way. If you're relying on AI, you're going to get a wrong answer. It's much better if you do actual research where they have real answers that will give you the correct answer. And if you do that, you'll be able to do that. But that's probably one of the reasons, or we're just thinking about it. We're considering the answers. We're stepping through the question again. One thing to keep in mind as we do this on the exam, there's only so much time on the actual exam. Fortunately, we have a lot of time that we can use on our live streams. Let's see how you did with this one. The question again asks, a switch administrator has configured link aggregation between two switches, but only one side is configured to use LACP. Which of the following would be the most likely result of this configuration? Would lag work in manual mode? Will trunking mode need to be turned on? Will the interface status be set to suspended? Will throughput be less optimal than normal? Or will the switches need to be restarted? Well, to be able to answer this question, it's helpful to know what link aggregation is. It's helpful to know what LACP is. And it's useful to know how those things work. Let's see what you think the answer is. We'll close the poll, and we're all over the place. 40% of us, though, if we go with the plurality of you, say that the throughput will be less optimal than normal. 26% say the interface status will be set to suspended. We also have 19%, the only other two-digit, which says trunking mode will need to be turned on. And then 7% and 8%, almost a tie for last place, between lag will work in manual mode or the switches will need to be restarted. So whenever you find this happening on a switch, this is definitely a switch issue, you're configuring link aggregation. We often refer to this in a shortcut. We just call it lag for link aggregation, LAG. That's what we're referring to when we say the lag will work in a manual mode. But when we are configuring one switch with one configuration and one switch with the other configuration, there's a mismatch there. Which one is the right configuration? Well, the switches don't know. And since there is this mismatch, the status of those interfaces will suddenly not be able to connect to each other because one switch is configured one way and the other switch is configured the other way. The switches will then set that interface to a suspended mode. This is not only with link aggregation, this is with any configurations that need to have two switches communicating with each other to make that happen. LACP is a link aggregation control protocol. LACP is commonly set up with a lag because it will automatically create that link aggregation connection between switches. And it really doesn't matter a lot with the detailed configuration underneath. It does a lot of auto configurations for you. This makes it very easy if you're plugging in two interfaces to do link aggregation. Then you think, let's plug in a third. We'll plug in a third connection between the switches. If you're running LACP, a lot of the configurations for that extra connection are just automatically integrated into the aggregation without you having to do a lot of configuration details. So that at least gives you a perspective. So let's talk about what the ports do on a switch. If you manually turned off those interfaces, that port would be administratively down. The switch would just not be working at all. But in this case, we didn't turn off an interface. We just configured two switches with incorrect configurations. One on one side and one on the other side. So there is a suspended mode that is set up whenever two switches just can't figure out what you're talking about. So there's been some type of mismatch between one switch and another. And for example, this, if you were to look at many, some manufacturer switches will say that the interface has an error disabled functionality, but really it is a suspended mode that it sets on these. And an example of this that I use in the course is the example that we use here. You're setting LACP on one side of the connection, but not on the other. That will certainly cause the switches to go into a suspended mode. And indeed, that's what 26% of you chose, not the plurality of you. Now, the 26% was in second place. 40% of you was what most of you chose, which would be the throughput would be less optimal than normal. I would say that's probably a stretch. It's not less optimal than normal. There's no throughput, which I guess is technically you're correct, which, as they say, is the best kind of correct. It's actually the worst kind of correct, but I understand what they're saying. Throughput will be 0. It will not be less optimal than normal. It'll be completely off. There would be no throughput at all. So not the right answer. It's not less optimal. It's not connected at all. The 26% of you that said the interface status set to suspended is the correct answer. 19% said that trunking mode will need to be turned on. LACP, link aggregation, and trunking, although many times used in conjunction with each other, are two completely separate configurations and can run independently of each other. You can set up a trunk without LACP or link aggregation. You could set up link aggregation without trunking. Those are two completely different things. So trunking has nothing to do with whether this connection will work or not. 8% of you say that the lag will work in manual mode, as we've already mentioned. It's not going to work at all. The only way to get it working in manual mode is to disable LACP on the other side and manually set up both sides. That would be one good solution, or set up the other side for LACP and it should all come back and start working immediately. And the last option, 7% said the switches will need to be restarted. Thankfully, that's not the right answer. Can you imagine needing to restart the switch every time you made a configuration change on your enterprise network? Probably not what you want to do, although technically, you probably shouldn't be making these changes during production hours anyway. Just so you're aware, most switches do not require you to restart the switch just to make one simple configuration change. That's not always the case. There are a number of switches that I've used through the years where if you wanted to change from, for example, a pure layer 2 switch and you wanted to turn on layer 3 functionality, some switches do require a complete restart. So you might run into a configuration option somewhere in there that requires it, but the vast majority of other configuration options and switches do not require any type of restart. The answer here is the one that 26% of you chose. The interface status will be set to suspended. That is the answer that indeed we were looking for. Speaking of layer 2 and layer 3, let's do a question about layer 2 and layer 3. This question asks, which layer of a 3-tier architecture acts as a midpoint between the users and the services? Would that be core, global, access, distribution, or private? One of those is the answer we're looking for. Which layer of a 3-tier architecture acts as a midpoint between the users and the services? Is that a core, global, access, distribution, or private? If you think you know the answer, use the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your site. If you want to know where to answer the question, that's where you answer it. Go right down there to the answer page at professormesser.com/QA. That's the link on your screen, professormesser.com/QA. Click S for savings at professormesser.com/QA. There you go. That's where you would go to get all of those. This is, as you can tell, another one of those questions about the design of the network. There's a lot of different ways to design a routed and a switch network. New technologies we're coming up with all the time. You can make a very complex design. You can make a very simple design. There's designs that are made for the enterprise, for a traditional company, for small business. There's other designs that would be useful if you're part of an MSP or an ISP. So it just depends on the size and the scope of what you need to do. A number of you already know about the the idea of a three-tier architecture. You may have even designed it and implemented it in your own network. It's a very common network design, so maybe you're already aware of this question. Let's see how you did. The question asks, which layer of a three-tier architecture acts as a midpoint between the users and the services? Is it the core, the global, the access, the distribution, or the private layer? Which one would it be? Let's find out what you chose. I will close the poll, and 50% of you exactly say the answer is the distribution layer, although 37% of you say the answer is the access layer. We also have double digits here, core coming in at 10% of the vote. And then it drops all the way down to 2% for global, 1% for private. Well, if we go with the large number again, which was not the right answer on the last one, I don't believe, but on this one, it is the right answer. 50% of you say the answer is distribution. A three-tier architecture consists of, you have a core at the top. That is the core of the network, probably where your MDF is located. The core of your network is certainly there. We also have at the bottom of that list where the users happen to be. You can see all the users' workstations down here. That is the access layer. So if you are connecting in to the access layer, from that connection, you're probably connecting to a switch that is local to you on a closet that's on your floor. So that is where your access or workgroup switches might be. And in the core of the network, there are much larger routers that you are connecting to in the core, which means the thing in the middle that kind of bridges you between all of these is the layer in the middle, or the distribution layer. The distribution layer for the three-tier architecture is what we would use to connect all of those together. The core, the distribution, and the access all work in conjunction with each other to be able to get traffic to go where it needs to go. So hopefully that gives you a perspective of this. This is really a type of layering of the network that's not uncommon to see. In fact, if you're going downtown, a lot of us don't live downtown. We live out in the suburbs. And so to be able to get into the core of the city, we need some way to get there that is something other than our local streets. We don't want to take local streets all the way there. So maybe we'll take a distribution channel, like an interstate, to get all the way into downtown. So we use these three-tiered architectures all the time. And it's something that usually the core of the network is your MDF, the access layer is local to you, and the distribution is somewhere in between. Usually the distribution layer is often located in the core of the network too. It's just an easy place to put it, but it doesn't always have to be that way, especially on larger campuses. There's so many different ways to design networks and to set them up and to get them running that this is just another way to make that happen. So in this case, it would not be the distribution layer. 50% of you got that one right. It would not be the 37% that said access. As we've already seen, the access layer is where your users are down here at the bottom. That's not in the middle of the connection. And it wouldn't be the core. The core is at the top, so it would not be the 10% of you that said core. Global and private have nothing to do with three-tier architecture. I just put them in here to fill it in. Those are terms we use for other aspects, certainly of cloud-based technologies and others. But in this case, the answer that we were looking for was distribution. 50% of you got that answer absolutely right. If you are watching this video for continuing education unit credit, and you would like to get a 1-hour webinar category CEU out of this, I would love to send you an email that certifies that you were here for that 1 hour of webinar category CEU. This is something you can do by following these instructions, and you must follow these instructions to earn the email. You would go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click the Contact Us link. In the Contact Us link, put your name, put your email address. In the subject line, please put September 2025 Network Plus. And then in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, which in this case are going to be core, distribution, access. Those are the 3 words you need to put into that message to verify that you indeed were here watching this. I will get your emails, and in about a week, I turn these around and get these emails back to you with a message that certifies that indeed you were here, and it has always been digitally signed so that you can, of course, go through that process and understand what those differences might be. Hopefully, this gives you something you can work with as you are trying to accumulate continuing education unit credits. I realize not everybody uses CEUs to renew your certification, but if you are and you need another webinar category CEU, this might be the one to do it. Make sure you follow those instructions. Go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click the Contact Us link. In that Contact Us screen, put in your name, your email address. In the subject line, put September 2025 Network Plus. And in the body of the message on a line by itself, we want core distribution access. You could also reverse it, I guess, access distribution core. Either one of those, all three of those words showing up is exactly what we are looking for. And that way I know that you must have watched this. Otherwise, how would you know what that question was? Well, that is the secret, isn't it? And being able to work through it. Hopefully that gives you a feel for what you want to work through and have the differences or at least understand what those differences might be. As you've already seen, there is so much to learn about this particular exam. Network Plus covers a lot of different topics. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of topics are listed in the official CompTIA exam objectives. And of course, I would encourage you to watch our entire course. I cover every single one of those objectives one at a time. And if you were to look at our course, it's 87 videos. It's a big video course. There's over 12 hours of content in that single course. Although I encourage you to watch every video, I realize not everybody has the time. And sometimes maybe it's a topic you're already familiar with. But wouldn't it be great if you had a summary of everything that was in that video that you could confirm that you really do know that content? Well, I've already created that using my course notes. This is my N10-009 course notes. These course notes are available in this physical form that you can see on the screen here. I also have a digital form of the course notes. There they are. This digital course notes are, of course, identical to the physical edition. And when you purchase the physical edition, by the way, you get this digital edition that you can download immediately. So while you're waiting to receive this book in the mail, we're going to print it for you and ship it to you directly. You'll still have access to all of this information that you can reference from any of your devices because this is a PDF and it includes all of the text from my videos, all the important charts, all of the important graphics, everything that you are seeing in that video, you're also seeing in our course notes. This is something that might give you a little bit of extra information to study from as you've finished all the videos and you want something to reference. This is a fantastic reference for all of those. If you want to learn more about those or see what other training materials we have available, you can go to professormesser.com/NPCN. Those are the Network Plus course notes, NPCN, or simply follow the main menus on the Professor Messer website for Network Plus. You'll see our link to the course notes in there. Something that might help you as you're going through your studies. Hopefully, you're very familiar with what that might be. And if you aren't, we'll talk about how you can become more familiar with the exam objectives in just a bit. Let's do another question, though. We've got time for another one. So here's a question, because I just haven't said enough IP addresses today. This question asks, which of the following would be an example of a private IP address? This might be a gimme. We're going to see how well you do this one. I have for you 5 different IP addresses, and here they are. The first one is 168.192.11.17. Is it 172.32.17.11? Is it 127.0.0.1? Is it 10.1.10.1? Or is it 165.245.240.55? One of these is a private IP address, but only one of them is an IP address. Hopefully you are familiar with what this is. If you're ever working through understanding these IP addresses, maybe you have already picked it out. Maybe you already know what it was, but if you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, go to that link that you see on your screen, professormesser.com/QA, to lock in your answer. Let's see how you did with this one. The question again asks, which of the following would be an example of a private IP address? Is it 168.192.11.17? Is it 172.32.17.11? Is it 127.0.0.1? Is it 10.1.10.1? or is it 165.245.240.55? Which one is it? Let's find out what you chose. We'll stop our poll. There it goes. And 59% of you say the answer is 10.1.10.1. 18% of you say it's 172.32.17.11. 11% of you say the answer is 168.192.11.17. And in single digits say 9% of you at 127.0.0.1. And only 4% of you say it's 165.245.240.55. Well, first, I think it might be a good idea to understand what private IP addresses are. Unfortunately, there are only 3 ranges we have to remember for private IP addresses. Generally speaking, although this is not technically correct, it's not technically accurate. Generally speaking, anything that's not in this list of numbers is a public address. Not exactly true. We can talk more about that if you want to, but just generally speaking, there are 3 address ranges that we refer to with IP version 4 that are the RFC 1918 addresses. This is referring to a request for comments, which doesn't sound like a set of standards. That sounds like somebody just asking for directions. But an RFC is the way that we create standards with these protocols on the internet. It starts off as an RFC that everyone can comment on. Then we can make changes to it. And once we finalize the RFC, it's locked in. So when we create a request for comments of 1918, it's more than just a request for comments. It's a standard that we constantly use across everything we're putting on the internet. So those 3 ranges we are looking for a private IP address are 10.0.0.0 through 10.255.255.255. So effectively, any IP address that starts with the number 10, that's a private IP address. There's more ranges, though. Another range you could use is 172.16.0.0 through 172.31.255.255. So anything that starts with 172.16, 172.17, 172.18, 172.19, you get it. If you go all the way up to 172.31, all of those IP addresses are also private addresses. And then lastly, there's a range. This is the one we often see on our Soho routers, probably the router that you use at home, is a 192.168.0.0 through 192.168.255.255, meaning if you see an IP address that has the first 2 octets of 192.168, also a private IP address. So just knowing that, if we go back to our list and 59% of you chose 10.1.10.1, that is the number that we were looking for because it starts with the number 10. And as we've already seen, anything that is 10.0.0.0 through 10.255.255.255, that indeed is a private IP address. And that is why that number is the right answer. Now, what about these others that we see there? We can see that 18% said 172.32.17.11. It starts off good. 172. Don't we have private IP addresses that start with 172? We absolutely do, but they only go up to the number 31. 172.31.255.255, which means 172.32.0.0 is not a private IP address. And of course, as you can see here, we've got information in this list that says 172.32, which means it is a public IP address, not a private IP address. We have 11% that say 168.192.11.17. All right, this one was a little bit cheeky on my side, to be fair. 168.192 sounds an awful like a private IP address, except it isn't. It's 192.168. Oh, I switched them. So for those of you that have reading problems, I have messed you up on this one intentionally. And it wasn't intentional, but they are not in the order that they should be, and therefore they are not matching the IP address. If it was 192.168.11.17, it would be a private IP address. Instead, it's switched 168.192. Wonder who has that range. Somebody do a who is for me and tell me who has that range of 168.192. It'd be fascinating to know. Just curious. Let's keep going through this list. We have 4% of us say it's 165.245.240.55. This is sort of a callback that I use in a lot of my videos because I used to manage the network that was assigned the IP addresses of 165.245.0.0. We were assigned a Class B address when I worked for an insurance company in my early days. And so I like to throw that one in sometimes just to remind me of the good times that we had at that particular network. We were bought by another company. It's no longer what or where it was, but it was certainly a lot of fun. I don't even think they have that IP address range any longer. I think that has gone somewhere else. And lastly, 127.0.0.1 is not a private IP address. That's a loopback address. And it's an address that is inside of every single IPv4 device. You don't believe me? Pop open one of your command lines on your local computer and ping that IP address, and it's alive. 127.0.0.1 is there. If you go to somebody else's machine, that IP address is also there. You go to somebody else's computer, they can also ping that IP address. In fact, you could disconnect from the internet and you can still ping that IP address because it is your internal IP address. It is the one we use for loopback on your IP stack. Technically, it's anything that starts with 127, but it's not a private address. It is a loopback address. So it would not qualify in this case. The only one of these answers that is a private IP address is the one that we see listed here as 59% of you answered 10.1.10.1. So hopefully that's given you an idea of how you might be able to determine whether an IP address is private or whether it is not private, just to give you a feel for those, because that could certainly come up on the exam. RFC 1918 is one of the objectives on the exam objectives. Make sure you are very familiar with it. I have one more question for you today in this first hour, although I know we're sort of at the top of the hour, but let's get one more into this list, shall we? Be kind of fun to do one more. This next question asks, a packet capture has identified a number of broadcasts sent to 255.255.255 and port 67. Which of the following would be most likely associated with this traffic? Is that for video streaming, VoIP call setup, Windows name resolution, secure remote terminal sessions, or automatic IP addressing? The question again asks, a packet capture has identified a number of broadcasts sent to 255.255.255.255 and port 67. Which of the following would most likely be associated with this traffic? Would that be video streaming, VoIP call setup, Windows name resolution, secure remote terminal sessions, or automatic IP addressing? If you think you know the answer, lock it in by going to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. If you've not done any packet captures yet, this might encourage you to do that. There's quite a bit that you can gather from packet captures from your machine. So if you have not installed something like, for example, being able to connect to your network and run Wireshark, you don't even have to connect, just run Wireshark on your current machine. And I think you'd be pretty good. If you think you know the answer to this one, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, you want to lock in your answer by going to professormesser.com/QA to lock in what you believe that answer to be. We'll have that right there. Let's see how you did with this one. The question asks, a packet capture has identified a number of broadcasts sent to 255.255.255.255 and port 67. Which of the following would most likely be associated with this traffic? Would it be video streaming, VoIP call setup, Windows name resolution, secure remote terminal sessions, or automatic IP addressing? What did you choose? I can't wait to see. 64% say the answer is automatic IP addressing. 17% say the answer is video streaming, and 10% has Windows name resolution. Then we drop down to single digits for secure remote terminal sessions at 6%. And lastly, 4% of you say the answer is VoIP call setup. Well, one of the things that you should pick out very quickly from this is that port 67. And if you go back to your list of port numbers that you need to memorize back in section 1 of your Network Plus exam, then you will quickly see that, oh yeah, port 67, that is used by DHCP. And DHCP has a process that we often refer to as DORA, D-O-R-A. That's discover, offer, request, acknowledge. That is the process used for DHCP. And one of the things that is done in that very first set of processes, in that very first section, in fact, let me bring that back on the screen, but instead get my face moved out of the way. There we go. We'll put it down there. Here's an example of a device on the network. This is Sam's laptop, and Sam is going to request an IP address when Sam first connects to the network. Sam is plugging in, and she needs that IP address, but she doesn't have one configured on her computer, but her computer is configured for DHCP, and one of the first things that is sent out is a discover message. It is sent from Sam's computer, which is being sent as 0.0.0.0 over UDP port 68, and is being sent to 255.255.255.255 over UDP port 67. Wait a second. 255.255.255 and port 67, that's exactly the broadcast that we captured in our packet capture in our Wireshark. We're looking at that capture. So it's the very first step where Sam has sent that message. The reason that Sam is sending it from 0.0.0.0, Sam doesn't have an IP address yet. Sam can't send it from her IP address because she doesn't have an IP address to send it from. It's all chicken and egg problem, isn't it? So, and also Sam doesn't know where the DHCP server is on the network. So instead of sending it to a specific IP address, it is sent out as a broadcast, which means every device that is on this local subnet will see this traffic. It will capture that information. It will interpret those packets and then determine what to do with them. If your computer does not have a DHCP server running on it, most do not, then it will simply drop that information. We're fine. But obviously, there is a DHCP server out here somewhere. In fact, here's one on this network with a .99, and it's going to send a message back to Sam, and those two devices will communicate to each other so that Sam's machine can ultimately be assigned an IP address. And of course, there's a lot more in that list to go through those 4 separate steps. That's just step 1, the discover process, but that is what we captured with this particular packet. And for those of you that answered, 64% of you that answered automatic IP addressing, this is the DHCP process. That's the answer that we were looking for. You guys did a great job at finding the answer here. Now, why would it not be some of these other answers that are on this list? For example, 17% of you said the answer was video streaming. Well, there's a number of different protocols we can use for video streaming, but thankfully, video streaming does not use broadcasts. Can you imagine if all of our video streaming just used broadcast and then every device on the network would have to interpret every packet that came through as video streaming? That would slow down everybody that is on the network. So not video streaming in this particular case. Would also not be Windows name resolution, which uses a different set of ports, protocols, and IP addresses. Usually that is a directed frame, probably using 445 or another common DNS type name resolution. Windows uses a lot of DNS these days, so that would probably be what's being used for Windows name resolution. 6% say that it is secure remote terminal sessions. There are a number of different ways to do remote terminal sessions, but none of them use broadcasts and port 67. And then 4% said a VoIP call setup. We've already seen that VoIP commonly uses port 5060 and many others. VoIP call setup does not use broadcasts, and it does not use port 67. That is almost exclusively seen for someone that is using DHCP, the Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. That is the answer that we're looking for. Therefore, the answer of automatic IP addressing is correct, and 64% of you got that one absolutely right. Well done. All of this information we went through today has come directly from the official CompTIA exam objectives for Network Plus. CompTIA details every single topic that you need to know for the exam in their list of exam objectives. I mean, this is a comprehensive list. This should be the first thing that you are studying when you go through your studies. This should also be the last thing you reference before you get to the point where you're scheduling your exam, because it will tell you if you really did study everything you need to know. So make sure you get your hands on these objectives. They are extremely useful. They will provide you with a great deal of information. And you can see I've even got these on my computer right here. This is the first 2 pages, another 2 pages. Look at all this detailed information. There's domain number 2, domain 3, domain 4, and domain 5, which has also at the end a huge acronym list. If you're big into acronyms, I think you probably learn all of the acronyms as you go through the first 5 domains, but they put another list there just for you. Those are the objectives that gives you a feel for everything you need to know for this. Hopefully, you've already seen these objectives. If you have not, they are free. They are on the CompTIA website, and they will tell you everything you need to know for this exam. They will also, because CompTIA sticks to this list so closely, you'll also be able to know the things that aren't included on the exam. I think I get as many questions asking me about what's on the exam as what isn't on the exam. This is the list that will tell you both of those answers. And that's usually what I tell people, is I just tell people, go to the objectives. It will tell you. Don't trust me. I can tell you what it is, but other people are telling you other things. You should probably download this. That has it in black and white. It is written on the page, and you can either confirm that what I'm telling you is correct, or you can tell me that I'm wrong, which isn't the case either, because I also use the objectives to be able to create the videos that are in my course. I effectively use this as a checklist because that's exactly what CompTIA does. Very powerful, very useful. Make sure you get your hands on those objectives. We do one of these study groups every month. We, of course, have another hour coming up. Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to answer your questions in just a bit. But in the meantime, I want you to know that we do have one scheduled for October. It's currently scheduled for October the 15th. Of course, we're not done with September yet. If you are studying for your Security Plus, or you know someone who is, we have our Security Plus study group scheduled for a week from today. So come on back next week. I'll have a whole new set of questions and answers for the Security Plus exam. But if you're looking at our next Network Plus study group, it is scheduled for the 15th. We've got A Plus on October the 7th and 9th, Network Plus on October the 15th, and our next Security Plus study group will be on the 22nd of October. These times, these dates can sometimes change dramatically, sometimes multiple times. So if you are wondering when our next live event is going to be, I always keep this list up to date at professormesser.com/calendar. So you can always go to that URL and you will always be looking at the latest information. If I ever have to change anything, I change it there first. So you will know instantly if chaos has ensued or if everything is going normally. You can guess which one probably happened, but we do a pretty good job staying on track, pretty good job of sticking to the times and the dates, but occasionally it's just out of my control and I do have to move things around. So I apologize when that happens. Most of the time we stick here, but that's always a good one to go to, professormesser.com/calendar. Well, stick around. We are done with the Q&A part that I have done for you, but now we're doing the Q&A part that you've done for me. You've already submitted some questions, and you can submit questions at any time on the link that we used earlier, professormesser.com/QA. I will be going through those questions and answering your questions in our after show coming up next. Don't forget about our Network Plus Success Bundle, our course notes, and more. You can find at professormesser.com/netsuccess. Also, don't forget about our discounted vouchers. Why would you pay full price at the CompTIA store? I got the same vouchers on my site for a lot less. Find that at professormesser.com/vouchers. Also comes with my free book, so you can get the exam hacks book and maybe earn a few extra points on your exam. And of course, you might want to check us out on social media. I'll be over on Discord after this. You can go to professormesser.com/Discord. Our entire course and more is out on YouTube at professormesser.com/YouTube. We've got Twitter and X. We've got Instagram. We got LinkedIn. We got Facebook and many others. You simply type professormesser.com/ the name of the site you would like to go to. Hopefully that's given you an idea of things you can think about for your studies. If this is something that you would like to work on or something you're working towards, maybe we've got you a little bit closer to getting that Network Plus certification. Stick around for the after show coming up next. Don't go anywhere. We're going to start that in about 10 seconds. Thank you so much for joining us in this first hour, and we will see you next time on the Network Plus study group. Thanks, everybody. Okay. Let's now get rid of the slide. There we go. Get rid of that graphic. It's time for the after show, everybody. Now is the part where I answer your questions. So we've gone through this process so far. You've done a great job of answering my questions. Now it'd be good if I answer some of yours. So if you are someone who would like to have these questions answered, you can submit them into our big list of questions. You can submit those for this second hour. And you could have, obviously, some of you have already submitted questions. You can continue to submit those questions all the way through our after show. When you submit them, they go into a big pile that I have over here. It's growing larger and larger as we speak. I will sift through them and see what questions you have. We can certainly address those and see if you have anything particular that you would like me to talk about. These questions can be about anything. They could be, mostly we focus on information technology, technology topics, certifications, getting a job. But if you have questions about anything else, I'm willing to look at the questions. I don't know that I'll answer any question, but I'll certainly consider any question that you'd submit. You can submit those at any time by going to professormesser.com/QA. So my job is to now look at a lot of questions you've submitted. I'm going to the screen now. There's a lot of questions in here to be able to look through them. So some of you are talking about the exam itself. Some of you are coming back to the Network Plus exam after being away for a long period of time. So I want to give you a quick reminder about the Network Plus exam. The Network Plus exam, the current version of the Network Plus exam is the N10-009. This is it right here. This is the one that was released just over a year ago, which means we still have a couple years left before this exam goes away. So we're really in good shape here for Network Plus. The N10-009 is what we would be working with. So if you are looking at your Network Plus materials, and the Network Plus materials are listed as the N10-009, you have the right materials. If they show that they are the N10-008, the N10-007, the N10-006, these are really old materials. You do not want to study from those materials because there were a number of significant changes to the latest version of the exam. There's generally a 30 to 40% difference between these exam versions. And because of that, if you study from older materials, you are already at a significant disadvantage. You effectively have no room for failure. And of course, that is the worst, to be in that situation. If you study from the newest materials, you will be studying with 100% of what you need to know for the current exam, rather than 60 to 70% of what you need to know for the current exam, which that effectively just sets you up for failure. You do not want that to happen. So make sure you are familiar with those different options, what those questions might be. So those of you that have those older materials that are anything but N10-009, nope, can't use them. You need to get rid of them. You need to get the latest there and how they can work for you to be able to give you the exact exam objectives. And of course, as I've already mentioned, you should of course go out to the CompTIA website and get the latest set of exam objectives. Incredibly important for that to happen. Let's keep going through this list. Let's go for this piece of it. I think I have a question here that would be good to talk about. This is a question we got in from Joel, who asks, I may or may not pursue the Network Plus in the near future. I have Security Plus, CCNA, and 5 years of help desk, and I am trying to advance into networking. I'm hearing from various sources that most or all employers are looking for people who know automation tools. Is it really that urgent? And do you have any recommendations for study resources? So this is a very common scenario. It's more common than you might think, especially for someone who clearly has a good set of credentials, certifications, and a job that's in the industry. You are in very good shape, Joel. So it seems like from the question you asked, you're worried that you're not. You're in great shape. You've got your Security Plus. You've got a CCNA, which some might say would be a more advanced networking certification than Network Plus. It is certainly different and is certainly more of an intermediate level certification. But without being in a networking role, it's difficult for someone to directly take that certification at its true face value. It is a lesser CCNA without having a networking job behind it. But there's that catch-22, isn't it? Well, how are you supposed to get a networking job if you don't have the credentials? And how are you supposed to get the credentials and have somebody take them seriously if you don't have a networking job? Therein lies the ultimate irony of getting jobs in technology, I will assure you. Fortunately, you're in pretty good position here because you already have a job at a help desk, 5 years of help desk work. So you sort of understand the world of technology. You understand the world of getting people the help they need, solving problems, understanding the troubleshooting process, understanding what you should change and what you shouldn't change on someone's system, somebody's switches, somebody's network. Sometimes that's more important than knowing what to change, is knowing what not to change. And so you're in pretty good shape here. But the question was really about automation. And is it really that urgent, was your question. It's not really about urgency. I think a lot of people have recently seen the push to automate in the corporate world. You've seen this when people talk about having these DevOps or DevNet type jobs where employers are trying to take people that they really know application development. And this was the core when we started this DevOps piece. They wanted to get programmers and turn them into operations people. Well, those are two different mentalities altogether. As it turns out, that exact meshing didn't turn out so well because it turns out programmers make awful operations people, and also operations people make awful programmers. And by operations people, I mean people in IT. I often see people, and this even happened, there was a conversation going on today in our Discord where someone was talking about computer science degrees and how that applies to IT. The answer is it doesn't. Computer science and IT are completely different worlds. The only thing that's the same between them is the keyboard layout. That's basically the only thing that's the same between those two jobs. Computer science is focused on creating applications, full-blown application development, using technologies like C++, using any application programming for mobile devices, doing this on Java or using some type of iOS type development platform. These are people building the apps on the computer science side, or they're building the hardware and the firmware that drives that hardware. Those are developers. Those are the computer science people. Those are important people and we need them in technology, but it's not IT. IT is a completely different group of people. IT, information technology, is a group of people that are maintaining the networks, maintaining the workstations, maintaining the servers. They are deploying the applications. They're deploying the servers. They're deploying the data. They're storing the data. They're protecting the data. That's the IT side. So when you are looking at a data center, you're accessing a database, you're using your email, you're surfing the web, you're backing up data, you're keeping these systems up and running. That's information technology. Programmers don't do any of that. And that's really where the divide is. There's not a lot of overlap, very, very, very little overlap between those two sides. But then we have this concern, this question from Joel about automation tools. Well, isn't that programming? Isn't that development? And I think people have often called this scripting and automation that we use in our industry as programming. I guess technically speaking, it fits into the category of programming, but I don't call it programming because I think it's important to push the programming part over to the computer science people where they're building applications. But in the world of IT, we do extensive automation, extensive scripting. And it's sort of humorous to see it written like this because is it really that urgent? I think Joel is really describing the need for those skills for someone who is looking for a job. Is that the urgent part? Because certainly scripting and automation is not something that has been urgently pushed into IT. These are technologies that we've been using for 30 or 40 years in IT. This is nothing new in the world of IT. We have been scripting and developing for a very, very, very long time. And so if you are someone who is in the world of scripting, you're in the world of automation, you're using batch files, you are using shell scripts on Linux. You've written PowerShell scripts for Windows. You're using Python to script Linux, Windows, Mac OS, and things that are in the cloud. These are technologies that are a normal part of your day. And the better you are at automation and scripting, the better and more skilled you will be, and the better position you will be to get those higher level jobs in IT. I guarantee you there is a direct correlation there. You should certainly consider getting more skills on something that makes a lot of sense. And if you had to start today, here's what I would recommend. You're looking at the world of automation. And for you, Joel, you've got a great background. You got 5 years of help desk. You got Security Plus. You got CCNA. You probably don't need to backtrack to Network Plus. And you've already said that. But you've seen that there is a gap there on the scripting side. Well, great place to start. So if you had to start, I would recommend probably starting with one of two different scripting languages, depending on where your interests lie or depending on where the job opportunities might be. If you see a large number of job opportunities in the world of Windows administration, Windows Workstation, Windows Server, Windows operating system in general, I would highly recommend you learn as much as you can about PowerShell. PowerShell is the built-in scripting language in Windows that allows you access to control and script practically any aspect of the Windows operating system. It is a step up from batch files in a big way. PowerShell gives you almost complete control as an administrator to make changes not only to the operating system, but into the registry, into the services, and into the detailed Active Directory configurations. And it is very scalable. There's a lot of support for PowerShell. And once you learn one scripting and automation language, a lot of those skills will apply to other automation languages. The syntax might be different, but the process is the same. There's a logic to it. So let's say that the jobs you're looking at, though, there's not a huge emphasis in Windows. Maybe there's a huge emphasis in Linux. Maybe there's a big emphasis in multi-platform. Or perhaps somebody wants to better automate a cloud-based implementation. In that particular case, your efforts might want to go into learning more about Python. Python is probably one of the most used scripting languages on that Linux side. And in fact, a lot of those scripts will apply and can be used across other operating systems as well, making it a very useful multi-platform type of scripting language. So those are the two I would recommend starting with. Pick one of them. Pick a PowerShell, pick a Python, learn as much as you can about scripting and automation with those. And whatever you learn, in fact, as you're going through it, you may be thinking, why am I going through this process of creating this Python file, or why am I creating this PowerShell script? What can I do with this? The thing is that once you learn the fundamentals of these scripting languages, you will start to easily be able to create, I think I created a batch file from that. I can now create a shell script from that. Maybe I can create a different script in another scripting language that we haven't even talked about yet. Those skills will apply throughout all of those. There may still be work you have to do to learn the syntax, to reference how different loops are done, to reference how you would get automation done, maybe an object-oriented part of it, but it is a very useful way to automate things in the enterprise. I use automation on this side all the time. I have scripts running constantly on my web servers. I have roll-ups that I do of my log files. I have files that I transfer down. I have backups that I do, all using scripts that I've written myself. And you should learn more about how to do that because every organization does some type of automation. And I will also tell you from somebody who's been in the world of cybersecurity, who has visited hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of companies and talked to their security professionals and have done practical implementations of these security technologies on some of the largest networks in the world. Every company needs better automation. Every single one of them. There's just not enough skill set in automation to be able to roll these out fast enough. And a lot of companies just haven't put the right emphasis in automation. It will save you a huge amount of time, huge amounts of time. Things that you would normally spend an entire day doing can just be done automatically behind the scenes. There are some people that have created careers in building automation for companies. They can guarantee the company, I can save you 40 hours of somebody's time right now. You could get rid of an FTE, full-time employee. You could save $100,000 a year for me coming in for a week and creating you some scripts. And if it doesn't, you don't have to pay me. There are people that do this, and they will come in, they will build out some scripts, make everything better, make it faster, make it more efficient. And now you don't have to worry about doing these menial tasks to be able to automate things inside of your network or automate cloud-based services. So I would not call it urgency, but I would tell you that people who are interviewing you would be very, very, very interested in your list of scripts. And I think that making those scripts and having scripts that you could talk about and tell stories about and explain how they work and explain how you came to create the script to begin with, these are great stories to bring to an interview and great credentials to put on your resume. So I think in that case, yeah, do some automation. It will make a huge difference in what type of skills you can bring to the table. And these are skills you will use for the entirety of your IT career. And in my case, even after, as it turns out. I guess I'm still in IT, right? Still doing some of that just for myself. I have my own servers. I have my own database server. I have my own caching server. I have my own reverse proxies. I have my own load balancers. We're doing everything ourselves. So, of course, there's lots of scripting that goes along with that. Thank you so much, Joel, for your question. Let's keep going through this list. This is sort of an inside baseball question, but I think it's useful to talk about. This is from D&D, who says, "Hello, Professor Messer. Have you ever considered to use closed captions for the live videos? For those of you that have seen my video courses in the past, and indeed my Network Plus course even today, we have human beings do the closed captioning for all of those videos. You may not have even noticed that. If you've never turned on closed captioning on our videos, you might not have realized it. And if you have used closed captioning on our videos, you may have noticed that they're really accurate to what I am saying, which is not the case with a lot of the automated closed captioning. So I don't use automated closed captioning with my videos. Even though it's gotten better as the years have gone on, it's still not perfect. The way that we do closed captioning is we have a third-party service that does this for us. They have access to watch the video as they are doing the closed captioning, so they can see what I've written on the screen. And when I say a word that they don't recognize, because who has seen words about reverse proxy or working with broadcasts on the network? Like, reverse what? Oh, it's on the screen. Proxy, P-R-O-X-Y. Okay, reverse proxy. And then you end up having a transcript and a closed captioning that is very, very accurate to what I am saying on the screen. And the only way to do that's with humans. That's just bottom line. A lot of what we do, everything that we do here has a human aspect to it because that makes the highest quality training materials. You never want to hand that over to automation or to so-called AI to be able to do something like that. It's going to be wrong every time. There's a percentage of that will end up being incorrect. And ultimately, that makes your training process that much more difficult. So I think that it's worthwhile to have humans do that for you. Now, the question here is about using closed captions for live videos. For videos that I'm creating for my training courses, those are offline videos. Those are on-demand videos where you can start it, you can pause it, type in a few things, and then you can reverse and listen to it again. You can hit play and continue watching it and keep typing. That's easy on my training course videos. Live videos are very, very different. And to be able to do this, they're very, very expensive to close caption. So you'll notice that for my live events, the only captioning that's available, if any, would be through the use of automation, which isn't that great, but it's really all we have. If I was to caption our 2-hour live streams, the captioning costs would be in the thousands of dollars. And although I don't generally share information about what we make on YouTube with these live streams, it's nowhere close to $2,000. So no, there's no good cost benefit from that. And technically, we don't do these live streams as a way to make money. That's not the reason for them. It's really to add to the existing training materials to help you in your certification studies. And sort of the revenue aspect of that is just kind of a small bonus that at least helps us keep the lights on kind of thing. So we have considered closed captions for our live videos. Just financially, it just doesn't make any sense to be able to do that. So I apologize that I can't make that happen. maybe someday I'll be independently wealthy, and then then it won't matter. We could just throw a couple $1,000s to the live captions, but currently, unfortunately, not the case. So I apologize. That's sort of the way it goes when you start breaking down some of the realities of cost when it comes to creating content. Unfortunately, that's one of the realities. So they're getting a lot better with sort of live captioning. Maybe YouTube will start adopting more and more live captions. So in the future, maybe that will be an option as well. More questions on here, quite a bit. Since we are talking about inside baseball, we can have a look at this, see what options are there. YouTube does have live captions, but there is no turning on or turning off the live captions. They're just there. It's not disabled on the stream. They're just not doing it. So YouTube picks and chooses what videos they will use to do what with. Makes no sense. That sentence has nothing good about it grammatically. YouTube gets to decide these things. So, for example, some of my videos, my training videos, you'll notice, have started having other audio channels that you could choose. So, for example, some of my videos, you could watch me, but you're hearing Portuguese, you're hearing Spanish, you're hearing Japanese, you're hearing Mandarin. So you've got different languages you can turn on and turn off depending on the video that you're watching. But they don't do it on all of my videos, just the ones that they've gotten to currently. So that's another idea of things that they work on and work towards. So along these same lines, let's talk about this question from my good friend Anonymous, who asks, people might have asked this a lot, why are you doing this? I think you mean it nicely. Anonymous continues, why make videos to teach Network Plus, Security Plus, A Plus, Microsoft, Cisco, and other video series that I've done? And why make those videos free on YouTube? What is my inspiration to do all of this? The ultimate inspiration, the way that these came about, I've told this story before, but it's been a while. So we'll talk about how this came about. The reason these videos exist is because of Best Buy. Here in the United States, Best Buy is a big box company. They sell electronics, consumer electronics, with what originally started as a brick and mortar store, and they continue to have these brick and mortar stores throughout the United States and elsewhere. And they also have certainly a large online presence as well. The reason that they're who you can blame for these videos is I have family members that would take their computers to Best Buy back in the day. This was now 20 years ago. And when they got the computers back, they wouldn't be fixed. And I would say to them, why didn't they fix your computer? They're the experts. They know these computers. And there's all these resources on the internet you can go to learn practically anything you want to know about Windows or operating systems or computer hardware, hard drives, whatever it happened to be. Let me show you. And then I went out to the Google and tried to find some good training to help people troubleshoot problems with their computer. Turns out I was wrong. Turns out there wasn't a lot of good resources for that. And anything that I found that could help you learn about how to troubleshoot these systems was something you either had to pay for, it was behind a paywall, it was just not available. So I thought, well, that is a very clear business opportunity. Maybe let's make some videos and see if there's a good balance there. If I made videos and made an entire certification course and put it out there for free, would it be worthwhile? And the answer is no. It's not. Financially, it's not. It is to a point. There's nuances to that. YouTube is not a great way to make a living, but it is a way to make a living. So there are things that can be done on the YouTube platform that can help a lot with finances. And if you make something that people would like to see, it does even better. And so that's why we sort of focused on the world of certifications, because how can you get a job or get a better job? Certifications is an important part of that. So our core focus is getting you a job in IT or getting you a better job in IT. That's what we focus on. And that focus has brought us to certification videos and making them available. So that's one of the things that really drove us to create that very first training course, and people liked it. So we did more of them. And there was a pretty good balance there between creating the content, putting it out, and creating a revenue stream that we could continue to do that with. And we found a good balance. We found the right balance for those. And it worked out okay. One of the things you will notice, people are asking in the chat room, one of the things you'll notice is that we don't do a lot of third-party advertising on these videos either. That's really more of a personal preference of mine. I don't like to do sponsorships directly. I don't like to promote other third-party products, mostly because I don't have a lot of control and input into those third-party products. And sometimes when you're promoting a product, that company will do something and then suddenly they've made people angry at them, and I just supported that product. Wait, that doesn't make sense either. So I prefer staying out of all of that. So that's why the channel exists. That's why we're doing these videos. That's why they're available for free. That's why we do all of those. So yes, you will not, there's some very important and very specific decisions we have made about how these videos are produced, what is in the videos, how we provide those videos to you, and the other training materials that we have. None of this is an accident. We have gone through a number of iterations, changes, testing, ABs. We've tried to find the right mix to give you the things you need, but ultimately, we want you to get a job or we want you to get a better job. And if we're doing something that is not directly providing that support, then we aren't doing it. So that's why you don't see a lot of dancing videos on TikTok. We're not going to do those. Those don't get you a job and they don't get you a better job. But we'll certainly do a live stream like this that, okay, it doesn't make a lot of money, but I think it works towards giving you that overall training experience you need to really learn the content, to step through a lot of these topics in more detail and perhaps help you towards earning that certification, which ultimately should get you that job or get you that better job. So there you go. That is our philosophy behind it. That's sort of why we make these. If it seems nonsensical, it mostly is, but there is a reason that we do this, and there is ultimately a series of decisions that we have made that have brought us here, and we did intend to do it this way, I promise you. So thank you for that question. Let's keep going through our list. We do have some time left. I should probably put my clock up, or I'm going to go way off time today. Today I do have a hard stop at the top of the hour, so I want to make sure I do not miss that one to have that there. Let's keep going through this list. We've got others there. Thank you so much for sending in these questions. By the way, you can send in questions at any time by following the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to do that. Should certainly have that there. We've got a lot in this list. I will tell you that sending me multiple choice questions in the questions is not really going to work very well for us. I'm not answering other people's questions as this. I'm answering your question. So if you have a question, send me your question. You don't have to send other people's questions. That probably will not be covered in the after show, as much as probably would be fun to go through some of those, but we're not going to do that. I don't tend to use other people's content to be able to answer questions on here. But if you have a question in your own words, you're just trying to find information out about a topic, that's absolutely what you should put in there. So please feel free to send those along. Absolutely. Here's a good question that comes up often. This is from John, who asks, I passed my Network Plus exam last week. Congratulations to John for passing your Network Plus. Always good to have an exam that is done. You've passed. It's now in your pocket. Now you can start using that to get that job or get that better job. John continues, what exam should I study for next? Thank you for all the help with your videos. This is John's not done. John's ready for the next one. Network Plus is down. Let's keep going to make that happen. So what is our next step to be able to make that happen? What should you study next? And if you talk to anyone in our chat, you talk to anyone on the internet, you talk to anyone on a Discord server, you talk to anyone else, any other individual, you ask 20 people, what should my next certification be? You will get 30 answers over what that is, because everybody puts their own situation into that answer. But the question you're asking is about you. It's not about someone else. So I think a lot of people are trying to be good about pointing you a direction, but it's hard to point you in a direction without knowing what you want to do with your career and what other employers in your area want you to do with your career. These are two very important things to consider, of course. Obviously, we are concerned when we start looking at the marketplace there, the available jobs that are in these markets. We need to think about what employers would like you to have. Here's what I mean by this. If you live in the United States and you live in the Washington, D.C. area, you live in Virginia, you live in Maryland, you live in D.C. itself, you live somewhere in that federal D.C. area of the world, that geography, there are a lot of jobs available in IT. A lot of the requirements are on the security side for those jobs. In fact, there are some minimum requirements that you must have from a certification perspective to be considered for those positions. Many of those positions have a bare minimum of a certification such as Security Plus. So if you lived in the DC area, the thing that I would tell you is, I don't know what your personal goals are, John, but if you're in DC, you probably want to have a huge emphasis on having that Security Plus in your pocket. Maybe that's a good next choice for you. But John, maybe you live in Minneapolis, maybe you live in Dallas, maybe you live in LA, maybe you live in Chicago. There will be a completely different mix depending on where you are. Your particular geography might have a lot of manufacturing jobs, or it might have a lot of financial positions, or it might be entertainment-based, or it might be transportation, or there's different markets. Those different types of businesses may have a different emphasis. Maybe they don't care so much about you having Network Plus. Maybe now that you have Network Plus, maybe they would like you to have a Linux certification. Maybe they would like you to have a cloud certification. Maybe they would prefer a higher level networking certification. Maybe they would like a Security Plus certification in that list. The only way to know is if you do some research. So you're asking a question to me, but what I'm going to give you back is homework, is what I'm going to give you back. And I mentioned this, there's a video that is in the YouTube video description of this video on how to get a job in IT with no experience. And in that 30-minute video, it's a long video in the world of YouTube, but it is chock full of information. That YouTube video describes, a section of that video describes how you decide what certification to do next. And what I really recommend is creating a spreadsheet, going to either an online job posting site that you like to go to, the Dices of the world. LinkedIn has a good number of job postings that are there, or whatever job posting site you like. Or you know what the big companies are in your area, you go directly to their website and look at the open positions that they're posting there. That is where you will find out what type of formal education would they like you to have. Do they want you to have a 2-year degree, a 4-year degree? What are they asking for? That doesn't mean that they're going to disqualify you if you don't have that, but that might be something that they would like to see in something that you're posting as a job application. They're going to put into that list what type of industry certifications they would like you to have. So they'll spell out for you, we want you to have A+, we want you to have a Linux certification, we want you to have Network Plus, we want you to have Security Plus. Whatever it is, they will make a list and they will have it available for you. Not only do you need to document this in your spreadsheet, document what the formal education is, document what certifications they would like you to have, and they're probably also going to have in their job posting the type of position this is and what skills they would like you to have. They might even say, need somebody who's strong in PowerShell. We need somebody who really understands a particular backup technology. We need somebody who has a strong background in Active Directory or whatever it is. They'll just have skills that are there. These are skills that hopefully match with you. Now, if these don't match your skill set and you have gone through 10 or maybe 20 different companies and you notice PowerShell seems to come up a lot, or Microsoft Windows Active Directory seems to come up a lot, well, there's the places where you might want to focus your future technology foundation efforts. You want to have the skills that employers would like you to have, but you also need to work on skills that you would like to have. There should be a happy medium there. Now, fortunately, in the world of IT, learning about Windows, learning about Linux, and learning about Mac OS, and learning about mobile operating systems, it's kind of a core foundational knowledge. You should probably have that knowledge anyway. Why not start over there if that's where employers would like you to go? Or maybe they say you should have Security Plus, go start your Security Plus studies. So although I could give you my opinion of what I think you should do next, it's only my opinion. And quite honestly, it's an uninformed opinion. It's not a very well-established opinion at all. So hopefully you can find the jobs in your area and you can make your own decision about what strategy works best for you, for where you live, and for what companies in your area or organizations in your area would like you to have. There's just not a good answer to that. There's lots of people that will tell you an answer, but none of those answers are going to be informed unless they've also gone through this process with you, which nobody has. So people will always tell you, oh, you should get a cloud certification. That's what you should do. Oh, you should get a Cisco certification. Oh, you should absolutely get Linux. Why are you wasting your time with cloud and with Cisco? You need Linux. Oh, are you wasting your time on that? You need security. Everybody wants security, so don't waste your time on cloud. And so you can go down this road forever. All of these misinformed. The only person that can make that decision is you. It needs to be a well thought out strategy. This is not a decision you want to make on a whim. It could take months to study for a certification. Do a little bit of legwork, a little bit of research first, so that whenever you do make that decision, it's a well-established, well-researched decision, and you're now making a very good decision about where you think that will take you, if anywhere. Let's keep going through your list of questions. See what other questions you have in this list. There is quite a bit. Is there a book on just the acronyms? That's what Daniel asks. Everybody loves acronyms, don't we? We're really good on creating acronyms in the world of IT, especially with Network Plus. And so, of course, we have not just a book on just acronyms, because quite honestly, that would be relatively worthless. Acronyms themselves are sort of relatively worthless. Let me show you what I mean to a point. You're with me. So for those of you that were watching before, here we go. We're back to our exam objectives. These are the exam objectives for the N10-009. This is Network Plus. And I showed you this earlier where you've got all the topics you need to know for Core 1. There's all your port numbers on the side of the screen. Now we have information on Section 2 for network implementation. Section 3, Domain 3 is the network operations domain. We've got network security, because there's security in every single one of these certifications, and network troubleshooting. And then in the after network troubleshooting is a big list of acronyms. Now, what a lot of people will do is they will go to this acronym and they will start memorizing them. AH means authentication header. Oh, well, what is that? I don't know. That's the problem with acronyms. It doesn't tell you everything you need to know. And in fact, just learning that AH means authentication header is really pointless in the world of technology. In fact, most of the time we're just using the acronym anyway. Hey, did you check the configuration for the AH? That is what we do. We never say, have you observed the configuration settings for the authentication header? Because we always work with abbreviations in our industry. So if you are going to go through this list, first, let me back up a bit. First, I don't think you should necessarily go through every single acronym that's in this list. There, I'll just say it. That's because if we were to back up into your exam objectives, I'm just going to go to the very start of these exam objectives. We're going to look at section 1.2, which is compare and contrast networking applications, appliances, applications, and functions. But notice in here that they have things like you need to understand intrusion detection system, IDS, or intrusion prevention system, IPS. You need to understand network attached storage, or NAS. You need to understand storage area network, or SAN. You need to understand access point, or AP. You need to understand content delivery network, CDN. You get the idea, right? So the acronyms you need to know are already part of the exam objectives, and you will ultimately learn the most important acronyms organically as you go through your training. If there is an acronym that is back here in this list that for some reason did not appear in your exam objectives, then it's probably not going to be as important as anything else. Fortunately, as I'm looking through this list, a lot of these appear. MTTR, MTU, MX, NAC, NAS, NAT, NFV is in there, NIC is in there, name server NS, yeah, it's in there. NTP is, so a lot of these you're just going to learn anyway. NTS, network time security, I don't know if that's in there. Maybe, yeah, with some of the new NTP stuff, some of the new time stuff. So it probably is in there. I have to remember myself what is in this list. So that's why I tell people don't spend a lot of time trying to do this. AH means authentication header, AH. It's pointless. You are not going to get a question on your exam that says, what does the abbreviation AH stand for? You're just not going to get it. It's not there. But what they may ask is, there's a problem with the AH. What is this associated with? You need to understand, oh, what is that AH associated with? So if you were really had to, if you were compelled that you had to make flashcards from this list of acronyms, put down the abbreviation, put down the entire spelled out words for the abbreviation, but then also include, what good is this? What is it used for? How does this fit into our world of technology? When would you see this being used? That's really the importance of these acronyms. Ultimately, I think you're going to get the acronyms as part of what you are learning anyway. So I think if you had to put this in a list of priorities, acronym is really down near the bottom of your priority list. The core objectives that are in your exam objectives are at the top of your priority list. So just so you can understand the comparison between those two, that's how I would compare and step through them as well. So there is a list of all the acronyms you need to know. You don't even necessarily need to go through all of those. You're going to learn them organically as you go through the exam objectives themselves. Okay, let's keep going through this list. And I'm going to do a question that's not in here, but it's sort of in here because I've gotten 3 or 4 of the questions that are in this list are questions that are around subnetting. There is a natural concern about subnetting. There is a natural uncomfortability about subnetting. Everybody spends a lot of time on not everybody, but many people spend a lot of time on subnetting. And they're very concerned about subnetting. And I think it's primarily because it's math. There's math involved here. And nobody likes math. Very few of us like math. I won't say nobody. If you like math, we look at you funny. I'm just telling you. I love math myself. I like the mathematical part of it. I think that fits my brain the right way. Math is something I get pretty well. I'm not great at math, but I have no problem interpreting and working through mathematical things. But when I'm in an exam, I don't like math. When I'm in the middle of an actual certification exam, I can't remember my name. And you're expecting me to recall all these other things and do math? That's one of the reasons you'll notice in my video course that I have the traditional style magic number shortcut method for subnetting. But I've also got my own 7-second subnetting because I wanted a way to do subnetting where there was no math. And that's what 7-second subnetting does, is it gives you a way to create a very fast way to subnet without ever having to do any higher math And by higher, I mean anything other than adding or subtracting 1. That is the extent of my capabilities. I can add 1, I can subtract 1. Don't ask me to do powers of 2. Don't ask me to count in intervals of 16, of 32. I can't do it. I cannot do it in an exam. And I've had people all the time point to my 7-second subnetting and go, look at, you got to create these charts and blah. It takes me a minute to create the charts. It takes me 60 seconds to create these very simple charts. And then I can instantly subnet from there. But let me tell you this, I've mentioned this before in a study group, is that we spend all this time worrying about subnetting. It takes up huge amounts of our time. People will spend days trying to understand the nuances of how to subnet quickly and still won't have it. And they'll come back to me after days of work and they'll say, I don't get it. How am I going to learn this subnetting? And my response to them is, in some cases, sort of surprising, is I tell them, well, just forget about it then. Don't study subnetting. Well, everyone in the industry, everyone on the internet, everybody who has anything to do with networking will tell you, whoa, wait a second. Subnetting is a fundamental skill. It's something you have to be able to do to work in the world of networking. You have to understand subnetting so that you can troubleshoot anything that you'd run into with IP. You have to know subnetting. Why are you telling people not to learn it? I'm not telling people not to learn it. I'm telling people, for the purposes of your certification training, don't worry about it. Because if you look through the exam objectives, and that's what we're about to do, here we go, you have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bullets that you need to know in this exam. For example, just in section 1, you have to know the OSI model, all 7 layers. Section 1.2, you have to know all about these appliances, these applications, these functions like VPN, QoS, TTL. You have to know, whoop, it's going too fast. Let me go to a different view of this. You have to know how to break down all of these different port numbers. There they are, lots of port numbers to go through, IP information. You've got connections for wireless networks, wired networks, transceivers, connection types. You got fiber, you got copper, you got mesh, hybrid, hub and spoke. Look at all these things you have to know. Finally, section 1.7, as we scroll down, under 1.7, under a subsection of 1.7 called subnetting, are 2 bullets: variable length subnet mask and classless interdomain routing. The one that we need to know about, of course, is the variable length subnet mask, VLSM, which is what we sort of refer to in the world of doing subnetting. Notice that 1.8 has nothing in subnetting, and then we get to section 2 where there's no subnetting, and then we get to section 3 where there's no subnetting, and then we get to section 4 where there is no subnetting, and then we get to section 5 where, guess what, there is no subnetting. So in reality, for the purposes of Network Plus, there is one domain. In that one domain is one section, that within that one section is one bullet that has anything to do with being able to subnet anything. This is why I tell people, if you don't get it after working through it for a day, just drop it. You could be spending that time on so many other topics that are in this list. Don't spend all of your time on one bullet that's part of one subsection, that is part of one subdomain, that's part of a larger subdomain, that is part of one of 5. Because you might get one question about subnetting on your exam. You might get 2. If the random number gods were bad, maybe you get 3 tops. But there are a large number of people that come out of their Network Plus exam and have admittedly violated their exam candidate agreement, but have said, I didn't get any subnetting questions. I studied for a week on subnetting. I got no subnetting questions. Yeah, because if you look at the exam objectives, very possible you could get 0. You could get no subnetting questions. And maybe you get 1. You know, statistically, you'll maybe get 1 or 2. But if you spent your time studying one or two other bullets that came up also on the exam, then that counteracts the things you don't know about subnetting. Although, quite honestly, if it's multiple choice, you still had a 25% chance of getting it right. So the numbers are working in your favor. The process is working in your favor. And by me telling you not to learn subnetting for the exam, in no way is meant to have you understand that subnetting is not important, because it's incredibly important, and you do need to ultimately learn subnetting, and you need to learn some type of subnetting shortcut so that you're prepared for doing more advanced troubleshooting. And once you get to your Cisco certifications, cloud certifications, and others, you will find that you will need to know subnetting a lot better, and you will need to be able to do it in your head or very quickly written out, because you will run into troubleshooting scenarios where you absolutely need to know subnetting. I created the 7-second subnetting process just for me so that I could get through my Cisco certification exams back in the day. And it worked like a champ, because I didn't have to worry about math. I didn't have to worry, did I count wrong? Do I have the powers of 2? Did I subtract those incorrectly? You know, anytime you're dealing with any 2-number addition, subtracting, or multiplication on an industry certification exam, I don't have the skills to be able to do that under that level of anxiety. You'll never see me on a game show that has anything to do with math. It's too much pressure. Can't do the math part. And with 7-second subnetting, there's no math. There's some math. The only math involved is either adding 1 or subtracting 1. That's not math. I mean, technically, I think we could argue. You could come to me and say, no, adding 1 or subtracting 1 is math. It isn't. You're wrong. You mathematicians, you don't know. You don't understand. It's a struggle when you get in these exams. You don't want to be there. So that's why I created that format, so that I didn't have to worry. When I was able to subnet on the Cisco exam, it took me 7 seconds to subnet, and I knew the answer was right, and I didn't have to double check, and I didn't have to check my math. There was no math. So there you go. That's my perspective on subnetting and the Network Plus exam, and why people will say, yes, subnetting is important, but unfortunately, people try to put that importance onto the Network Plus exam where it does not need to be. So there you go. If you're some folks in the chat room are going, what are you talking about? 7-second subnetting. There's a whole video on it. So absolutely go through the video. We give you all of the charts you need on that video. We step through a number of different subnetting exercises in that video. We do 4 or 5 of them so that you can start to get a feel for it. Oh, we do it a couple times, and you'll see that, 1, 2, 3, 4, you're done. In fact, it's really more spelled out in the video. You will find your own shortcuts within my shortcut. So there you go. You've got some ideas on my feelings about doing subnetting and why it's important. But you may find, for your purposes, for your studies, for the way that you like to learn, maybe it's not as important as it really needs to be for the purposes of the Network Plus exam. We'll get you into that. I know we're at the top of the hour. Let's see if we can get another question in and getting those there. I think it's a lot there. Let's talk to this one. I want to do another sort of industry question. And this is a pretty good one. This is from Ram, who asks, I'm going from a very different career, emergency medicine. Right now I'm stacking certifications. I'm halfway done with my A+, finishing part 2, working on Network Plus, Security Plus this semester, ultimately looking for a pen testing career. I know experience speaks volumes, was a good recommended beginner job with those certifications with the cybersecurity path in mind. So when you start looking at higher level positions in technology, and pen testing is certainly one of those, and to some degree, what we are calling cybersecurity is another one of those higher tier positions within IT. When you talk about getting or working your beginnings of your career to ultimately get to that point, you need to start putting together a strategy, which it sounds like, Ram, in this case, you already have. The strategy is incredibly important because there are no entry-level positions in IT that are pen testing positions. You don't come out of school, or you don't come out of getting your A+ cert and go right into a career in pen testing. Does not work that way. And to some degree, the same thing applies to things associated with IT security. Now, I'm calling it IT security and not cyber security because cybersecurity is a very broad term, does not have a true definition, and it applies towards anything relating to technology and security, regardless of what field you happen to be in. If you are an application developer, there's a cybersecurity component to that. But you're in IT, so you're not dealing with that type of cybersecurity. You're dealing with this type of cybersecurity, which is why I don't call it cybersecurity. I call it IT security because you're responsible for maintaining the firewall, for configuring authentication backends, for making sure that the data that is stored is being stored properly, that the permissions and the rights have been set up, that you have the right encryption for your VPN, that you have the right authentication for your VPN, that you're able to identify and block attacks to your network, that you're able to create reports that summarize authentication failures across the network, that all of these things apply to IT security. Well, you can't do any of those. You can't learn how to secure Windows or Linux or Mac OS until you understand Windows or Linux or Mac OS. You cannot make the network more secure if you don't know how the network works. So this is why we often tell people getting to a position where you are in the world of IT security, or at least getting a position that is significant in the world of IT security, requires that you have built a foundation, which RAM you're already doing. You need to understand as much as you can about as many operating systems as you can. You need to understand about Windows, about Linux, about Mac OS, and these days about tablet operating systems, phone operating systems, and more. You also need to know as much as you can about networking. I will say the world of IT security is almost as much networking as it is security. Is it? Is it though? Well, let me put it this way. Let's say that you are implementing a firewall into your network. It's not going to be one firewall. It's actually going to be two firewalls because as an enterprise, you need fault tolerance and redundancy. That if one firewall fails, you want to be sure the other firewall is there to pick up the slack. You can't just have an open network to the internet. So we have two of them. Now, how are they implemented? Are they implemented as an active passive where one is always working and if it fails, everybody fails over to the secondary device? Or is it implemented as an active configuration where both firewalls are active at the same time and working at the same time? There are obviously very big differences on how both of those scenarios are engineered, how they implement into the network. Are they working as layer 3 firewalls? Are they working as a layer 2 firewall? Are they operating as a layer 1 firewall? That's the way firewalls work these days. You get to decide. And in each one of those decisions, there are a number of different design considerations that you must take into account. And of course, those design considerations are also dependent on the type of technologies you have surrounding the firewalls. Are they connecting to a router? Are they connecting to a switch? Are they connecting in conjunction with a proxy? Who's communicating through the firewall? Is the firewall also your VPN concentrator? Is it also a way to identify vulnerabilities through IPS? Is it scanning for viruses and malware? These are things that today's firewalls do. It may even be a VPN concentrator for a site-to-site VPN. It could also be a VPN concentrator for an in-user in-station VPN, the client-based VPN, which means that you have a different set of IP addresses, subnet masks. Maybe there's a DHCP pool. Maybe all of these things are networking questions. I don't think I've said anything about security yet. All of this is networking. So that's why I tell people all the time, if you want to be an expert in IT security, you need to be an expert in networking and to some degree also a very strong foundation in operating systems because this is going to come up. Because you'll probably need to you'll need to integrate that firewall and you'll need to create policies on the firewall that may be based on IP address. Those policies may be based on whether certain applications can flow through the firewall, or even better, you're integrating the firewall with your Active Directory infrastructure so that if you are in the shipping and receiving department, you're able to go and visit certain websites. But if you're part of the executive team, there's a completely different set of websites you have access to. Maybe you have a more that you're able to access. Maybe if you're part of HR, there's a completely different set of rules for you. And we can base those rules around the Active Directory groups that are already part of your existing Microsoft infrastructure. So there's the worlds colliding together. Now you have your IT security with your firewalls. You have the networking part of it that integrates that into a layer 3, a layer 1, or some other type of configuration with your network infrastructure and your network design. And you're integrating in operating systems like Windows and Active Directory so that you can apply rules in the firewall itself. To be able to do that, you need to understand all of those technologies. So that's a big ask. That's a big undertaking. And that's why I tell people it's going to take you years probably to get to a point where you would be comfortable with all of that. Would you be able to grab pieces of this as you go? Absolutely. Could you become a VPN technology expert in a number of months? I bet you can. That's all you did, you'd become an expert very quickly. That's just one little sliver of things that you need to know. What about the routing part of it? What about the switching part of it? What about the layer 1 part of it? And then how do you implement this in an environment where there is redundancy? And how do you have traffic going out one firewall that might come in through another firewall? These are stateful. How does one firewall understand the state of another firewall that's a completely separate physical device? And there's why you make a lot of money when you become an IT security expert, because you have all of this knowledge. You have this foundation that you have built over years and years in this industry. And only after accumulating that foundational knowledge are you then able to leverage that into that particular role. So there you go. That's why if you are looking at a career and you want to do something with pen testing, you want to do something with forensics, two completely different parts of IT security, two very high-end parts of IT security. There's extensive training that you're going to need, extensive knowledge in the industry, and years of experience just to be eligible to apply to one of those positions for pen testing or to apply to one of those positions for forensics. I was always fascinated with forensics. I was always fascinated with pen testing. I think we all are. That's what we see in the movies. It's sexy. It's interesting. We caught the hacker. We saw what was going on in real time. We hacked through the firewall, whatever they do in the movies. It's interesting and it's exciting and there's a little bit of drama there. I was never really driven to get that additional knowledge to get into that area. It wasn't for me. Maybe it was the report writing that I didn't like. But they don't tell you after you do the pen testing or after you do the forensics, now you get to write the report. They never show that in the movies, do they? So you got to write the reports. But in the world of IT security, I loved network design. So taking network design and applying that, leveraging that into the world of IT security was a natural move because I had also years of knowledge of Windows, of Active Directory, of Linux, of Unix, some Mac OS. I have much more now. And I was able to take all of that knowledge, understand how all of those operating systems work across the network, understand how routing works, understand how the routing protocols work, understand how switching works, understand the nuances of switching, of link aggregation, of all of the configuration settings around that. Now I want to be able to move that into the world of security. And it was an easy hop at that point. So that I let people tell me, oh, the reports are just automated these days. Wrong. There's someone who's never been to court. So that's why if you are in a position where you want to get into the world of IT security, get into the world of forensics, get in the world of anything that is higher level technology, you need to build the foundation. And that's why if you come to our site, we talk about A+, we talk about Network+, we talk about Security+, not because those are popular certifications, although they are. I really do feel like those are foundational. Those give you enough flavor to know, I kind of like this operating system thing. Let's do some more with it. I kind of like this networking piece. Let's do some more with it. I like doing this security thing. Let's build on that. And there's lots of places we can start building. As you know, in the past, we've had Microsoft training, we've done Cisco training, and who knows what the next training is that we might come up with. I think I know, but who knows what it might be. But it's always focused around, can we build a foundation? This is something you should be doing in your career as well. If you're just looking at your current job and you're just looking at what am I going to next, you're not looking far enough. You should be setting some goals that are out there. Sometimes they are goals you don't know that you'll ever hit or ever reach. You don't know. There's no way to know. But the only way you would ever get there is if you start reaching that direction. So you don't know until you try if you're ever going to make that particular move. When I got my first role, my first true role in IT security, it was as a systems engineer for a next generation firewall company. I was not looking for that job. I was not looking to move into the world of IT security at that time. I was working in, my focus at that time was mostly around network management, network reporting, network performance. It was all focused on packets, on protocols. But I got a phone call out of the blue from somebody I used to work with in the past who said, hey, I just interviewed for this job. I want to be working sales for these guys, but I need a good engineer. Would you consider it? Would you consider talking to them? I thought, well, let's see what they got. And I saw the firewall and I thought, this is remarkable. Nobody's doing this. I'd love to be part of that. And had a conversation going with them. And ultimately, sometimes I think to their chagrin, they hired me. They didn't know what they were doing. That's fair. That's fair. But they did hire me. And I stayed there 7 years. And they had a great time. It's one of the best jobs I ever had because it was fascinating and it was problem solving. And there was something different every day. I will say there is part of this that when you're working for a third party and you're going into a lot of different companies and looking at a lot of different networks and you're plugging in a next generation firewall into all of these networks, you see everything. And I mean everything. You see the good parts of the network. Oh, you see the bad parts of the network. You see it all. It's one of the things I wasn't really ready for when I started getting heavily into IT security is I forgot that often there are police involved. There is law enforcement involved and sometimes federal law enforcement involved because you see things going on that nobody else has seen, probably nobody else should see, but now has to be addressed. So it's one of those things that until you get to that point, you don't sort of understand the scope, but you do understand the foundation. So that's what I'm telling you and anybody else who's interested in creating that foundation. Start building it now. You may not even realize the work that you did with Windows, the work that you did with Nmap, the work that you did with Linux, the work that you did learning about switching and routing. And you think, well, I'm just turning on and off ports and I'm just setting up spanning tree. Is this really going to help me? Oh, yes. Oh, yes, it will. Because you don't even realize until you've built the foundation and you're standing on top of it and you're thinking, wow, this is really high up here. I've got a lot that I'm standing on. And it's before you even know it. So don't become discouraged at learning all those port numbers with Network Plus. They're going to come in handy for you later. Don't worry about all of these things you have to learn about link aggregation and spanning tree and setting up port security. And it's going to be very important for you in the future. You just don't know it yet. But that foundation becomes incredibly important. It's critical for setting that strategy for what you want to eventually do. And the bigger that foundation is, the more work that you've done in building that knowledge base, the more flexibility and the more control you're going to have of your own career. And I'm here to tell you that because that's how it worked for me. I know it because I lived that. I think anybody can do that. So that's one of the other reasons that we do what we do here. And one of the things that we focus on, building that foundation. If we can make your foundation a little bit higher, and a little bit higher, and a little bit higher, before you know it, you're up in the clouds looking down, wondering, how did I get here? Look at all this. We could do more with this. It's a lot of fun too. If it wasn't, we wouldn't be doing this. We wouldn't be telling you about it. We wouldn't be giving you that perspective, and we wouldn't be giving you the ideas of what you will be able to do with that in the future. Set your goals high. You're going to get there. You just need to set the goal so you can start working towards it. I think that's a pretty good place to finish up today. I want to thank everybody for joining us. We have so much fun in that first hour, setting up all of those different things that we are talking about, working through all of the different questions that we posed in. Perhaps even better, I love getting your questions in the second hour. Thank you so much for submitting those. We do one of these also every month. Make sure you check the calendar at professormesser.com/calendar to know when that's going to be. Our next live stream will be a week from today. Wednesday of next week at 12 noon Eastern time, we will have our Security Plus study group with all new questions. And of course, we have availability in the after show for you to ask questions of anything you'd like as well. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next time on the Network Plus study group. Thanks, everybody.